Yes.
All right. Okay, today we're going to be talking about the Nag Hammadi library within the context of course, Gnosticism. so, um, this is going to be a rather complicated talk, and that's a good thing. I think it's the Gnostics will be very happy that it is that complicated, and I do have a different kind of connection with Gnosticism that I just kind of want to bring up. My PhD is from Claremont Graduate University, and it was it was a school of religion that used to be the Department of Religion years back. Now I think it's a department again. That was a part of a project to translate the Nag Hammadi library into English. Not only that, but worked with another Claremont institution, the Institute of Early Christianity. They worked together to, of course, publicize and publish all the Nag Hammadi library. That's important. So, so when I went up to Claremont, basically, they're the ones that were responsible for really systematically releasing and publishing the entire library. And that means that who I took courses with and who I got to know were many of the individuals that directly worked on these texts. So I do have a little bit of an inside scoop, an inside story, so to speak. So I did know James Robinson. I know Marvin Meyer, who was part of this group that translated the Nag Hammadi and worked on it, and even did archaeology in the place in Egypt called Nag Hammadi. He was my mentor. He's the one who brought me into Claremont in the first place. And of course, I have met Elaine Pagels and Karen King and all these individuals. And so my professors, one was Greg Riley, another person who worked a lot with the Nag Hammadi. So I'm surrounded by that. And so when I went to Claremont for my PhD, um, I constantly heard conversations, and you're going to get some of this tonight, some of these materials. In fact, I tell you one interesting bit. James Robinson, you'll learn more about him a little bit later. Very important. And without him, we wouldn't have the systematic knowledge of the Nag Hammadi that we do today. He's the one, he's the architect in a sense to made this all show it to the entire world. Otherwise, it may have been parts of it may have been lost. But and it's interesting because I even have part of his library, James Robinson. So one day I was at Claremont, and I saw this commotion, and some people were carrying books out of the Institute of Antiquity and Early Christianity, which is also where the school of religion was located. And I saw James Robinson there, who I've met many times and went to various lectures, we had conversations and so forth. And he says, "Hey, go in, go in." I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Oh, it's my library. I'm giving it away. Take as much as you want." And of course, I had nearly first dibs. So I got into this room filled with his books, and and some of these books are James Robinson's books. Heck, some of these files, which I'll show you later, are his own personal files. We'll talk about that later. So I got a lot to tell you, a lot to share. I think you're getting my point already. So let's get started. Okay. So before we do, we have to understand, of course, just what is Gnosticism. What is it? In essence, the word gnosis is simply the Greek word for knowledge, while Gnosticism is the spiritual and or religious system that pursues this knowledge as a fundamental part of these beliefs. So from the halls of academia, Theme Perkins, who is a professor of theology at Boston College, asserts that Gnosticism, quote, refers to a revealed knowledge available only to those who have received the secret teachings of a heavenly revealer. All other humans are trapped in ignorance of the true divine world and the destiny of the Gnostic soul to return to its home there, unquote. I believe also that Lilu, in her It Is I, hits the metaphysical nail on the cosmological head when she declares that knowledge for Gnostics happens to be, quote, is not an intellectual exercise. No, it isn't. It isn't an intellectual exercise. It is not a passive understanding of some aspect of spirituality. Rather, knowledge has a redeeming and liberating function that helps the individual break free of the bondage of the world. So breaking free of the bondage of the world. So that's what it is. But and again, right? You know, when Gnostic thought is brought together into a system, as I said, it becomes Gnosticism. But what is Gnosticism? Scholars, oh, they have long debated the issue. Perhaps they don't know. Okay, well, in general, the primary characteristics are evident within the Gnostic system. So I'm going to go ahead and give you an outline of what Gnosticism is, maybe what it isn't too, right? So number one, okay, and by the way, under number one, I have various subdivisions that go to four. You can go number one, A, B, C, D, or one, two, three, four. But first of all, number one, uh, most systems of Gnosticism outline cosmological speculations. Cosmological speculations usually connected with creation are asking the question of how we got where we are now. A few stock features of this cosmological architecture show up, and I'll go ahead and outline them. So here it is. So most of them will have the following, not all, but most. Number one, it's under subdivision of number one, so you can go A, right? They have something that's called the monad, MONAD, the monad, which means the one, the ultimate, indivisible unit of all things. In fact, this word monad was already used by Pythagoras and early Greek philosophers, so it's not strictly a Gnostic thing. The monad is the name of a unity from which, as all things connect, from which all the multiplicity derive, from which all numbers arrive from, but it's still the singular essence, right? Sometimes it is this divine oneness, this divine principle, which we use the word arche, right? From all things starts. So it is the beginning, right? The one, right? Some people have connected this to monotheism. But then again, it goes into the multiplicity, which many have understood as polytheistic. But within Gnosticism, it's a little different. You have the monad, you have the one, which leads to the next. The next is called the pleroma. Pleroma. By the way, this word is also used in the New Testament. So pleroma, this is, I like to say this, I'll say it again. It's, the monad is like the sun. The pleroma is like the rays of the sun that emanate its light from the one. And from the one becomes a multiplicity. It becomes many. But as the light stretches forth, it becomes less and less light. And perhaps, well, yes, less and less pure, right? The word pleroma is oftentimes translated as fullness. It is a fullness or the multiplicity overflowing from God. And the word, the logos, is often used in Platonic philosophy as well as the New Testament, moves from or out of the pleroma having originated from the monad. We're going to see this again in Platonism as well as the New Testament, but you have this also within Gnosticism. We'll go there in a few moments. Okay. By the way, it's interesting because if you read your New Testaments and you sometimes you see the word fullness, you go, oh, the fullness of God. You go, oh, that's really nice. You know, God's full and everything else. Oftentimes the word is actually pleroma. And your Bible translators are going, well, they'll understand the word fullness. Yeah, but that's not exactly what it means. And by doing this, you're actually intentionally, in some cases, trying to remove the biblical context from this realm in which Gnosticism arose. You guys following that? Yeah, so you change the word around. So it is the multiplicity, right? The multiplicity of the pleroma oftentimes has many names too, as I said. So within this fullness, you have those called the aeons, A-E-I-O-N-S, or they also call the archons. Sometimes they are simply known as the origin or the beginning, like arche, the beginning. And so, since from this radiance, all things begin to emerge and form, right? So you're going to see this frequently. There are intercessors emanated from the one or the monad and who occupy this pleroma, inclusive of Sophia or wisdom, right? Oftentimes also known as the word or separate from the word, in Greek known as the logos. We find this in the work discovered in the Nag Hammadi called the trimorphic protonoia. We also find this in the prologue of the Gospel of John. Okay. And the third component is Sophia. Sophia is so often within these systems, not often, but often associated with the pleroma. Many Gnostic myths follow the theme of wisdom after trying to comprehend the one or the monad or God. Always a problematic um, action because the deity is beyond comprehension. And because that she does this, there's what will happen is that she falls. The fall wisdom or the fall of Sophia, in turn, is the fall of the descent of the spirit into the material world. For the Gnostics, Sophia's act of trying to comprehend God was hubristic in the extreme. So you just don't do it, right? Fourth component that we see in the architecture, or D, we're going A, B, C, D under this subheading of one, is the demiurge. The demiurge, from the word demos, belonging to the people, and ergon, work, and hence it is the maker, the artisan, the craftsman. And we see this is in philosophical language. This is the creator that is responsible for the creation of the physical universe, as opposed to the monad. Right? As opposed to the monad, the demiurge is what creates the material realm. Right? In many contexts, the demiurge is also known as the adversary, ruling the dark material world and opposing the monad or the god of light above. So you already have this dualism. So you guys got it. So there you have it, right? All right. So that's the characteristics in general. Let's move on to number two. Second, Gnosticism has some degree of duality in describing how we got where we are now. Gnostics often contrast this world with the world we came from before. The world above is of the light, while this world is of the darkness. The world above is of the spirit, while this one is of the flesh or the material. The world above is unified in perfection, while this one is divided in imperfection. The world above is infinite, while this one is finite. The world above is good, it's pure, it's true, while this one is evil and defiled and false. The world here that we live in, of course, is the realm of death, but the other world is the realm of life. Interesting, right? You're going to see these kinds of dualisms. However, again, at the prologue of the Gospel of John. You notice that too. Okay. You just keep on going. So you do, but this dualism you see in Zoroastrianism, and you see in Manichaeism and a few others. Third, number three, Gnosticism is concerned with the journey of the soul. This was when I took Greg Riley at Claremont Graduate University, a very well-known Gnostic scholar, and I did have a focus on Gnosticism within my PhD. He said this is the one of the best answers for Gnosticism that is inclusive of the majority of the systems. You know, where they tend to have so much diversity, they all seem to be going into the idea of the journey of the soul. How specifically the soul or our spirit got here, how it became part of the material world, and where it would or should go after that. To the light, go to the light, right? Go to the light. Okay, so that's the idea, right? Number number four, Gnosticism is about redemption. It's about salvation. What will it take to liberate the spirit or soul from its imprisonment within the wicked material world, for the inherent wickedness of the flesh that we have in their belief system? Sometimes the redemption comes fully from within, ourselves through gnosis, through knowledge, recognizing that you are simply a sojourner in a very strange land, and that you possess this divine spark within you. Other times, knowledge is brought on through a redemptive figure, or reminding you, waking you up, shaking you up, that you have this spark that's originating within you, and it came from the spiritual region beyond, and stirring you, trying to make you awake, to once again make you have this blaze of recollection of your real spiritual heritage. You even have occasions when it's the combination of both. You guys feel like you're understanding Gnosticism? Is this helpful? Right. All right. Number five. Naturally, in this process of asking, the key part of all this is gnosis, the Greek word, as I said before, of knowledge. Gnosis, or knowledge, plays different parts in different Gnostic systems, but the important thing to remember that it is always, always, every time, playing a fundamental part. This knowledge is only secret insofar as that most people don't realize the illusion they become a part of, or they participate in. So it's wake up time, right? Time to rouse oneself up from the sleep and smell the cosmological coffee, right? You have to always know that there will always be those who just simply don't get it, or won't even care to get it. Be more concerned with the living of their day-to-day mundane materialistic existence. Thinking just makes their head hurt, right? So Lilo notes that Gnosticism is about, this is a quote, is about pursuing rational knowledge of the spiritual element within, and thus of God, and definitely not seeking access to secret codes or records that allow a sudden grasp on the meaning of life through our intellectual minds. Many early Greek Gnostic, do speak of secret or veiled knowledge, right? What is implied by such terminology, however, is that there are deeper meanings in human life beyond and beneath the surface of what is seen with our physical eyes. They are called to grow spiritually by piercing the veil to the hidden meanings of the things experienced and accept as true that there are hidden things concealed in those that are visible. Within this framework, the role of faith with gnosis, with knowledge, as a step is difficult to determine. Some Gnostics recognize the role of faith, and others do not. So that's an unquote. Now, Brendan Mullen states a true Gnostic believes in nothing, doesn't have to. A true Gnostic knows nothing except at the end game of all faith-driven religious philosophies. It, right? So many Gnostic systems have gnosis as the totality of the ontological endgame, but some don't. Clement of Alexandria, a self-proclaimed Christian Gnostic, saw the role of both within the system of belief. So you have, so it's a little different. So it's not simply secret in a cult sense. It is a secret in a deeply metaphysical sense, hidden for us directly before our own eyes. Number six, last one, Gnosticism cultivates the use of myth in order to articulate the details of how the cosmological events unfold and how they will again refold in the end. Hence, most Gnostic systems have an elaborate eschatology as well as an elaborate cosmogony. Okay. So I believe one of the best ways now to we got the ideas, we have a general architecture. Let's go a little bit further. Let's go a little bit deeper. In order to do that, I'm going to use as an example a poem. One of my favorites when it comes to the Gnostics, and it's a nice way to introduce some of the major ideas via myth, right? Via their storytelling. Okay, so here it is. It's called the Hymn of the Pearl. The Hymn of the Pearl. It dates from the 2nd century CE. It is connected to a work known as the Acts of Thomas. I have to say that within the Gnostic system, there are many different schools of thought. One of them is the Thomas school of thought, and that includes the Gospel of Thomas, this crazy book called the Book of Thomas, and finally, what's called the Acts of Thomas. Now, not all of the copies of the Acts of Thomas contain this Hymn of the Pearl, but in fact, only 2 of them, even though we have the Acts of Thomas in Greek, Latin, Ethiopic, and Armenian. Yeah. Only 2, but I think it's pretty good. It will kind of cut through and give us a mental picture of what's going on here. So the story goes as follows. It doesn't really trace a grand cosmogony or elucidate a specific strategy and how to enlighten is to pass through the dark regions below. But here it is. The story, it's a beautiful psalm, allegedly sung by the Apostle Thomas to comfort his fellow prisoners that were residing in an Indian jail. Now, and of course, the story goes as follows. The Hymn of the Pearl tells the story of a prince who was sent by his father, who is the grand King of Kings. He sent down to Egypt to fetch that one pearl which resides there near the ravenous dragon. So here is the grand King of Kings. He's sending his son, who is the prince, into Egypt to find this pearl. This pearl is guarded by this dragon. His father promises him that once this is accomplished, he could put back on his jewel-studded garment. So once he fulfills this mission, he can return and put back on that jewel-studded garment, which means that he's not wearing this jewel-studded garment when he descends into Egypt to find this pearl. Okay. By the way, this jewel-studded garment, it was made out of love, right? And made of love for him specifically, and would become eventually a herald for the king, along with his well-remembered brother. So this is what you will happen, right? So once you return, you'll unite with this jewel-studded garment, and be reunited with your well-remembered brother, which in a sense seems to be like you'll be reunited with your other half. You follow it. So it says, go ahead, let's do it. So leaving his kingdom in the east, he arrives in Egypt and hurries directly to the dragon and camps near his den. Now, in order to, I'm actually quoting from him of the pearl, you may not know this, in order to guard against the Egyptians and against intercourse with their impurities, he puts on their style of dress in order to go undercover, as well as to shun any suspicions that he was a stranger in a strange land. So he's going to be he's in disguise, right? So in a sense, this is a soul that's now taking the disguise to kind of fit in with the Egyptians. So as fate would have it, the Egyptians became aware of the fact that he was a stranger and formed a plot to snare him and knock him into a slumber with their matter-laden food. With a taste of this materialistic food, he succumbs into forgetfulness, no longer remembering that he was a child of the king, and so becomes subservient to their king in the darkness. So it's obvious that the Egypt represents the material world, right? Represents the material world, and he is now taken on the shell of the flesh. But unfortunately, when he engages or interacts with the material world, he starts to forget his spiritual destiny and who he really is. And that is, of course, the child of the King of Kings. And he becomes subservient to now the realm of the material, the dark realm. Then he sinks, quote, into deep sleep under the heaviness of their food. So people who, they say that those who are supposed to know, who haven't known yet what their destiny is, they describe them as asleep. We're sleeping, and we need to wake up and understand that we are strangers in a strange land, that we do not belong here. Now, Gnosticism, unfortunately, is kind of an exclusionary idea, where many of the Gnostic systems have those people within certain tribes or groups that are sleeping that can become aware, and those who are asleep but are not destined to any kind of awareness until later on. You would have to die and be reincarnated as one of these other lines. And typically, the line that has this ability to even understand this are from the line of Seth. So there you have it. Okay, so he is sinking into this deep sleep. Meanwhile, his parents recognize that he is suffering, and they also suffer over him. So the King of Kings sends a letter. He sends a letter. He sends a message. He sends a word, right? A word, like the Logos. Sends a letter exhorting him to arise and become sober out of sleep, since he had fallen under the servile yoke. And so in many Gnostic systems, you have this idea that a redeemer figure, a salvic figure, something has to be sent down. to remind the person, to kind of wake you up from your deep slumber, to wake you up from your sleep. And so this in a sense would be like a Christ figure. Although it's interesting because in many cases you have the prince, who's almost like a redeemer figure, and then you also have the word, which is a redemption kind of figure, and two are both acting as, in a sense, two anointed ones or two Christs, right? So he's instructed to call to mind his garment full of gold, recollect it, and his mission regarding the pearl. Now, what's interesting is that from here on, the pearl, he doesn't show him finding the pearl. So many scholars will say, no, no, what happened is the very realization that he is a stranger in a strange land and that he has knowledge of where he's supposed to be is the very pearl. It is the reminder. There we go. So heading back home towards the light, encounters a female being that lifts him up and helps guide him on his return journey. There's lots of stories concerning what this is. The other half of his soul, perhaps, right? Finally, of course, he is reunited with his beloved garment and perceived in it his whole self as well. From here, he enters into the realm of peace. This is right. This is a great story, right? So he has returned from which he had started. And so, in a sense, we are all that prince going down, those, I should say, who are destined to be Gnostics, right? We'll just say we're all Sethian Gnostics here, right? Those who are destined, we are all, we're all in a sense looking for that pearl. But we, many cases we have, unfortunately, come up with various challenges. That ravenous dragon is around every bend, so to speak. And we've slumbered because of the matter-laden of food. We become distracted. And that's kind of like the central core of the journey of the soul, right? Uh, Realm that we, of course, move through. And of course, obviously, we think of the King of Kings, and that does sound like that does refer to uh, uh, obviously Judaism and Zoroastrianism, as well as other beliefs as well. But we're going to keep on going here. Okay, there's lots of things that go here. Now, as I said before, we're going to kind of have an idea of what Gnosticism is about. So now we got to talk about specifically the Nag Hammadi library. Okay, so as I mentioned before, when I accepted by getting into Claremont Graduate University for my PhD, I was very well aware of the famous Nag Hammadi library, one of the greatest discoveries of ancient documents in recent history. If people hadn't heard of the Nag Hammadi discovery by name, as they usually do in the case of Dead Sea Scrolls, most everyone seems to know about it from some of the important books discovered in the collection, namely the Gospel of Thomas, right? But a few would also know the Gospel of Truth and the Gospel of Philip and the Sophia of Jesus Christ and the secret book of John, right? And of course, there is another collection of codices that were Gnostic that were discovered before the Nag Hammadi. For some strange reason, get hooked up with the Nag Hammadi. And this collection includes, of course, the Gospel of Mary. So there we go. So let's go there. Okay, so the first time I walked into Claremont's Institute of Antiquity and Early Christianity, I was really in awe. Of course, I knew this was where so much of the work on the Nag Hammadi was completed. Though I felt a certain connection with this amazing find as I creaked across the wooden floor into the library, punctuated by its huge central table. It was once a command table used by generals during World War II. It was brought here to become the definitive table where some of the most legendary scholars of ancient Christianity and ancient religion once studied and argued over this most amazing collection. And of course, later on, I would actually have classes sitting at this very table. And just for fun, I would sometimes, when classes weren't held there, I would just do my homework there, hoping that by working at this table, some of those good vibes I could soak in from this great scholarship. Right. As I walked through the institute, I saw photos from Nag Hammadi, um, and of course, I'd often see the tall frame of a certain man who commanded attention. I knew his face well from television and from listening to him on the radio and also reading his books and from many lectures. It was the face of James Robinson. This is the scholar who made it all happen, the scholar who really risked his reputation to make sure that academia would benefit from the fruits of this discovery. But not only the academic realm, that's what I admired about James Robinson, but also the world. He believed everyone should know, everyone. He believed that knowledge from the academic ivory tower, so to speak, belonged to everyone willing to learn, wishing to learn. And so from him and from Marvin Meyer and from Elaine Pagels and from Karen King and from Greg Riley, I'm going to tell you the story of what happened. How's that for sources? From my notes, from their own words. So you're going to hear little bits and pieces that you've never heard before. Hey, this makes it a one-of-a-kind experience. And I'm glad it's being recorded. So you want to take notes because this is the only time you're going to hear this kind of story. Okay, so the archaeological discovery of Nag Hammadi goes back to 1945. Yes, I'm going to throw in interesting bits of information all the way through. It began, well, with a guy by the name of Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali. No, not the famous boxer. It floats like a butterfly and sings like a bee. Not that Muhammad Ali. Uh, this Muhammad Ali, he was a camel driver from the village of El Qasr, which was ancient Chenaboskia. One fateful day, the soul of Muhammad Ali and his brother, Khalifa Ali and Abu Ahmad, they were out looking for fertilizer. You got it. Yeah, fertilizer at the base of various cliffs in the Egyptian region of Nag Hammadi, near where the Nile bends on its way from Tunabaskia to Pabu. As most of Egypt, um, the area, of course, is steeped in ancient history. It's renowned as an early Egyptian burial site that goes back to the 6th dynasty, as well as a very active monastic community of Christianity, the asceticism of Pachomius. Now, Robinson himself notes, quote, when the local sugarcane harvest was over and the land lay fallow during the brief winter, Muhammad regularly dug soft earth at the foot of the cliff that served as fertilizer for the fields. He had been digging fertilizer, he recalled, just a few weeks before the Coptic Christmas, which is January 7th, when he made the discovery. So that's January 7th, 1945, unquote. As he searched through the arid cliffs for dung and fertilizer, Muhammad Ali suddenly struck a hard object concealed under the ground. What he found was a huge earthen jar closed with a shallow red dish and sealed with bitumen. Now, I got to tell you, first Muhammad Ali was afraid to open the jar. He was afraid that the jar contained some evil jinn. That's right. Not as in gin as the drink, jinn as in genie. right? Now, while jinn can be both good and bad, or in between, the malevolent form of jinn was oftentimes associated with haunting ancient relics. And of course, for the unfortunate, this form could either curse you or could even, well, kill you if you disturb them. Yeah, Muhammad got to thinking maybe the jar was filled with gold. So his mind raced between two possibilities, two possible choices: spiritual vengeance, material gain. Spiritual vengeance, material gain. Finally, material gain and greed won the day. And so anxious to find a lavish assortment of gold and perhaps, a smattering of jewels as well, he broke the seal. There's a personal touch right here. With his madness. What? The Maddox? It's a hand tool similar to a pickaxe. So nothing delicate. It's like this big pickaxe. Boom. Nothing like the most delicate of tools for one of the world's greatest archaeological finds, right? Sarcasm. To his utter disappointment, rather than a lap full of gold, Muhammad Ali got 13 very dirty books bound in gazelle leather. By the way, the gazelle leather smelled bad, putrid. It's like, oh, it's been there for 1,700 years. So it didn't smell that good. I'm sure he thought, oh no, it's a genie. I'm in trouble. Worthless, he thought, worthless. Of course, these books, again, would prove to be one of the most important archaeological finds of the 20th century. But Muhammad Ali didn't know that at the time. Naturally, his discovery did attract us nearby camel drivers and their friends. There's no secret out there in the dry and chalky hamlet of Hamadoun, right? Your business is everyone's business. So right on the spot, Muhammad Ali decided to divide the 13 codices into 7 lots to reveal his generosity and perhaps his eagerness to get rid of it. I don't know. But the other camel drivers weren't very well pleased. Not at all. In fact, they looked scared. They told him they feared that the evil black magic was behind this find, that the books were in fact cursed, and rejected his offer by throwing the codices back at him. So right away, rough treatment. Robinson notes that Muhammad, quote, stacked it all back up together, unrolled his turban from around his head, put the codices in it, slung it over his shoulder, unhobbled his camel, drove back home, and dumped the junk in the enclosed patio in his house where the animals and their fodder were kept. Okay, so basically, open with the medics, torn apart, thrown to other camel drivers, thrown back, taken home, and thrown in the house. Woo! Lots, pretty delicate. Oh, the story's going to get worse. You guys ready? So the poor camel driver didn't know what to do with this bunch of worthless paper nobody seemed to want. It smelled really bad. He wasn't sure, but his widowed mother, her name is Ahmed, knew exactly what to do. Since Muhammad left his collection of books on the straw directly next to the oven by the patio, she decided the ancient paper made the perfect kindling for a fire. That's right. So leaf by leaf, she burned most of Codex 12, along with all the loose leaves she found from the other codices. She burned it. Of course, she, followed a long line of precedent because this is what other villagers did the same thing. They made these discoveries before. That's what you do with these dirty bits of paper with strange writing on it. And he did this for generations. Why stop an age-old custom now? Doesn't that make you sick? Isn't that awful? How much we've lost, right? Well, you're thinking this story can't get any worse. Guess what? The story gets worse. Fearing, okay, what happened is this. Muhammad Ali decided to kill his father's murderer 4 weeks later. What? Yeah. According to Muhammad Ali, this is according to him. This is Muhammad Ali talking or boasting. I don't know what. He said that they, quote, hacked off his limbs, ripped out his heart, and devoured it amongst them as the ultimate act of blood revenge. Cool. So that's what happened to the murderer of his father. Well, guess, by the way, his mother, the one who just burned these, one of the old codices, actually supported this brutality, telling his son to keep their mattock sharp, keep their pickaxe sharp. Great mom, right? Okay, so fearing blood vengeance, I wonder, right? Muhammad deposited the books, because now the police and everybody else is on there. Muhammad deposited the books with a local Coptic priest by the name of Basilius Ab-Misa. Since the police were constantly raiding this house, and chances were good that they would find these ugly bits of paper. You see, the Muhammad is starting to think that maybe they're worth something. Now, Basilius's wife, the priest's wife, wife's brother, so he gives it to Basilius Ab-Masi, right, which is a Coptic priest. The Coptic priest is married, he has his wife, and the wife's brother, Ragib Andrus, happened to be a traveling English and history teacher for the local Copts. He saw one of the books and indeed recognized that they could be of some value. And from there, Ragib Andrus gave Codex 3 to a Coptic physician by the name of George Sobey, who happened to study Coptic for fun. George Sobey, in turn, informed the Department of Antiquities in response. The rather sickly Togo Mina, curator of the Coptic Museum in Old Cairo, paid 300 Egyptian pounds for Codex 3, and the book was deposited in the museum on October 4th, 1946, according to the museum register. Well, by December 1946, Togo Mina had already introduced Codex 3 to two French scholars, François Dumont and Henri Corbin, and finally, Jean Dorset in early 1947, who proclaimed the work as Gnostic. Finally, right? He was interested specifically in a secret book of John. But then, of course, only on January 11th, now here we go. This is just going to be a big mess up. Here it is. On January 11th, 1948, the general public and most scholars heard officially of the Nag Hammadi discovery by the Egyptian press. There's a problem. This is so sad. Meanwhile, at the same time, another startling find was being announced. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Oh, no. And the discoverer of the scrolls happened to be another guy by the name of Muhammad. Muhammad indeed in this case. And what happened is that the press got confused. You got two discoveries coming out at the same time. They can't tell the difference. So guess what discovery gets emphasized? Yeah, Dead Sea Scrolls. He want to Nag Hammadi. He's like, what? Well, yeah, ancient scrolls found in the desert, guy by the name of Muhammad. It's got to be the same. So I'm telling you, this is like a comedy of errors. Are you guys following this? Are you guys getting how bad this is? So the problem is it doesn't get the recognition it needs. So that's great. And then the guy at the museum, he dies. His name is Togomina. He dies in 1949, and a guy like Pahor Labib takes over, and they redo everything in the museum. And the Egyptians decide they don't like the French. Well, there's lots of reasons, So what happens is they turn to German scholarship instead. And it's kind of like, give me that, give it to the Germans. So now the Germans have it, right? So there you have it. Well, you think it's going to get worse? Yeah, it does. So, but that's only the fate of Codex 3. Oh no, that's right. It's only one codex. What about all the others? Wait, how many codices do we have? 13. Oh, and that was only Codex 3? Yeah. So they go everywhere, right? So um, remains. So some go to Egyptian merchants, a certain Nashid Bista, which who sold one to a gold merchant of Nag Hammadi. And then, of course, there's another sold to a grain merchant. There's one that was sold to a local one-eyed outlaw by the name of Bahij Ali. This outlaw got hold of these Nag Hammadi, right? And then one got sold and got into the collection of Fokian Iltano, a Cyprian dealer who realized its value. Are you guys? So eventually, Codex 1 got exported to out of Egypt to the Belgian antiquities dealer by the name of Albert Eid. He offered it up for sale in New York, in Ann Arbor in 1949 for $12,000, but nobody bought it. They thought it was worthless. So, yet with the help of the Dutch historian Gilles Quispel, Albert Eid's widow eventually sold it on May 10th, 1952. For what reason? Who's going to get this codices, Codex 1? You guys ever heard of Carl Jung? The Jung Institute bought it, wanting to give it to Carl Jung as a birthday present. Sorry, aren't you glad you're hearing the story that you never would? I'm taking the time because you're not going to hear this anywhere else. So here again, it gets recorded. I feel good about that. So hopefully you're enjoying the tale. We'll get on to the codices, but I want to make sure that we understand how this thing was discovered, right? Quispel realized when he looked at the collection that's been given to Young that some of the missing pieces happened to be in the Cairo collection. He started to put things together, and so but still, the fate of the codices is you got 13 codices in 13 different places. Now you're following. You're thinking, well, but you mentioned the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and it's not part of the Nag Hammadi codices. But how come you say it was connected with it? Oh yeah. Meanwhile, there's another collection. This collection, it's called the Papyrus Berolinesis 8502. It was 2 manuscripts. Basically, it includes the Secret Book of John, the Sophia of Jesus Christ, the Gospel of Mary, and the Acts of Peter. Now, it was discovered in the 19th century, near Cairo. Yeah, okay, so they must have known about it then. No. What? After another complicated series of events, it ended up in German hands to the scholar by the name of C. Schmidt. And then there's a series of accidents happened. First of all, when Schmidt almost completed the first printing of the manuscripts, a water pipe in the printing house burst, destroying everything. Then Schmidt was finally ready again. And you know what happened? Right when they're ready to print it out, World War I hit. All right, so that didn't work. So finally, he got everything working again. It was 1938, and Schmidt was preparing a new impression. It was ready to go, and then he died. Fortunately, a certain Walter Till took on that mantle in 1941. But guess what was happening then? It's called World War II. He completed his work in 1943, but he couldn't print it. It was delayed until finally published in 1955, but it wasn't well publicized, and so it got glommered on. You break the same period of time with a Nag Hammadi find, so people just don't know the difference anymore. Okay, are you guys following that this is just like a whole series of unlucky events? You thought the Dead Sea Scrolls was a terrible story? I think this takes the cake. Finally, right? What happened is that well, James Robinson. Now you know why he's a hero. James Robinson appears. Not all archaeologists, academic heroes appear like Indiana Jones with a whip, right? Although he certainly had a whip in many ways. This American theologian from Claremont became interested in Nag Hammadi in the 1960s, and mostly like, well, where is it? So he was frustrated by scholars making various pompous claim after pompous claim of how they're going to publish this great actual find, and they never do it. And they promised the world, and we got diddly squat. So UNESCO, United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, tried to coordinate their efforts with the Egyptian government and managed to photograph the majority of the collection on microfiche from 1962 to 1965 in preparation for a facsimile edition, which never appeared. It became all too clear that the Nag Hammadi was not going to happen. So what did he do? Well, basically what he did is he says, okay, so we're gonna all get together and we're gonna translate this thing. And he sent out invitations to all the top scholars all around the United States and in England and in France and Germany. And you know what the response he got back was? They're too busy. I don't have time. Maybe next year, maybe later on. He's going, oh no, this is not going to happen. Nobody wants to work on it. It's like it's cursed. A lot of people heard that it was a form of heretical Christianity, and so more conservative groups were afraid that that would taint their good name of these scholars. Why? I don't know why. And so they don't want to be guilty by association. So they went. So James Robinson decided, you know what? Fine. What I'm going to do is I have some easy labor. You know what they're called? Graduate students. We'll get those graduate students together and they're going to work on this. Isn't that great? Yes. So what happened is, so it will not be lost like the Ark and Raiders of the Lost Ark, stashed away someplace, right? It's going to be. So what happened is that James Robinson, he goes to work. By 1970, 34% of the Nag Hammadi was published in German or French, 21 in English. And what did he do? He managed to get it all published. And the facsimiles too. And so there you have it. He also outlined a code of ethics when it comes to archaeological discoveries. His code of ethics are as follows. Number one, editions principles. The scholar who accepts the responsibility of the first edition of a manuscript accepts the assignment on behalf of and for the academic community as a whole. There are to be no exclusions of any researchers. No exclusions of any researchers. Furthermore, any first translation, no matter the qualifications of the scholar, is also the first mistranslation. This means that ongoing scholars' debate is expressed and needed to be corrected and improve the edition. Number two, policy commission and future manuscript discoveries. A commission should be created to set up policies for the correct handling of future discoveries. These could be international organizations such as UNESCO. Membership would include a variety of scholars and organizations to avoid exclusion. Of course, the commission would establish policies and procedures that would be published and distributed to the academic community, museums, and libraries. Number three, on-call team of technicians. Expert technicians should be ready on short notice to implement the correct procedures to keep damage to a minimum, right? Pre-publication accessibility was another one. Number five, practical policies. Initial discoverer could be given certain rights to publish it within 5 years, but after that time, it's for everybody. And of course, number six, eliminate the conflict of interest. Scholars who edit the manuscript should not be involved in assigning and managing publication rights. This is a very important establishment. Now we have some kind of rules that are now used to this day when it comes to making new discoveries. Okay, so what happened is that you have the release of all this. It finally gets published, and it turns out that those graduate students that were assigned various jobs to translate, to publish, to edit, because scholars didn't do it. They are now household names to this day. Marvin Meyer, Elaine Pagels, Bentley Layton, Karen King. Recognize their names? There they are. Yeah. So they made the name for themselves. Well, what happens now is that here's the codices. Now, I know this is a long laundry list, but I want you to get your idea of how much we gained from this publication. I'm going to be reading lots of names here, but it's for a purpose. So, as I said before, it's 13 codices. These are what they discovered in each of the codices. Here we go. Number one, which is the, Carl Jung's birthday codice. Happy birthday, Carl. His edition included the prayer of the Apostle Paul, the Apocryphon of James, the first copy that we have of the Gospel of Truth. There'll be another one later on in the collection. The treatise on the resurrection, and the tripartite tractate. Codex number 2 included the Apocryphon of John. That's the first one of a few, a long version. The Gospel of Thomas. That's right. The Gospel of Philip. The Hypostasis of the Archons. The Origin of the World. That's the first copy of that. The Exegesis of the Soul. The Book of Thomas the Contender. So Codex number 2 has quite a bit. Big ones, right? Codex number 3. The Apocryphon of John is the second copy. Shorter version. The Gospel of the Egyptians. The Gnostics, the Blessed. Sophia of Jesus Christ. It's the first copy of that. The Dialogue of the Savior. Number 4 Codex has the Apocryphon of John. This is the third copy we have. And of course, another copy as well. I love the Apocryphon of John. Reason why, and interesting thing about that, Apocryphon of John is so popular. I'm going to go ahead and go over that next. Well, in a little bit. So we're going to go over these, so what these are about. Also, you're going to have the Gospel of the Egyptians again. Codex number 5, Gnostics the Blessed, the second copy. The Apocalypse of Paul. The first Apocalypse of James. The second Apocalypse of James. The Apocalypse of Adam. The 6th codice is the Acts of Peter and the 12 Apostles. The Thunder, the Perfect Mind. Authoritative Teaching, the Concept of a Great Power. And then you have Plato's Republic. Sections 588a to 589b. Just throw in some Plato in there for fun. Discourse on the 8th and the 9th. The Prayer of Thanksgiving, including scribal notes. Asclepius, 21 and 29. Number 7, Codex number 7 is the Paraphrase of Shaman, the second treatise of the Great Seth, the Apocalypse of Peter, the Teaching of Sylvanus, the 3 Stelaes of Seth. Codex 8 is Zoroastrianus and the letter of Philip. Codex, that's it. There's only 2. That's going to get shorter. Codex number 9, Melchizedek, the Thought of Noriah, the Testimony of Truth. Number 10, Codex is Marcinus. That's all. Have Marcinus for Codex number 10. Codex 11, the Interpretation of Knowledge, a Valentinian Exposition, and quite a bit in there. It's pretty, and the Elegans and Hyperphone. Codex number 12, mostly burned. We have fragments. Remember Mom? Remember Mom burned it, the codices, right? We have sentences of Sextus, about 10 pages of the 39 original. Part of the Gospel of Truth, fragments, not much. Number 13, Primorphic Protonoia on the origins of the world. And then, of course, this codex consists of only 8 leaves that were pushed into the cover of codice number 6. The reason why I read this, and I wanted you to hear every name, that's a lot of information. So when I say that this is a library, it really is a library. It's not just a few little bits and pieces of knowledge. It's a lot of information hitting us at once. It's a lot of books. It's a lot of books. So we do understand a lot about Gnosticism. Well, what do we learn about from these works, right? Okay. Well, we know that they date from the 4th century, the actual manuscripts. How do we know that? Well, we found 2 receipts. Yes, receipts hidden in the binding. And these receipts date from 333. It was reused 341. Another from 346 to 348 BCE, respectively. So they let the receipt for someone to buy something. We have a receipt, so I got into the cover, and they're dated. Well, that's great. So we know how old they are because it's written down. They're written in Coptic, and we know that they are mostly translations from the original Greek, as referred to by the early church fathers, including Irenaeus. For example, we do have, we do know that some of these works are also quoted by Hippolytus. Now, Irenaeus lived in the 2nd century, Hippolytus 2nd into the 3rd century. So I already know that the majority of these works date at least to the 100 CE. Looking at the Gospel of Thomas, however, it actually exists in 2 versions: the Coptic version, which we discovered, of the Nag Hammadi, and a fragmentary Greek version from the 3rd century CE. The Greek version contains about 16 out of the 114 sayings of the Coptic version. Most of the evidence, though, however, prove that the Gospel of Thomas dates back to the 1st century. Dates back to the 1st century in the way that the language is used, as well, of course, as in references to the Gospel of Thomas within the next century. So, yeah, so there you have it. There's other evidence too. It's quite a bit. This is the use of the same sources. We'll go there later on. So what's this? So the significance, I'm going to give the detailed significance of the Nag Hammadi to Kurt Rudolph in his Nature of History of Gnosticism. He summarizes it as follows: the amount of our original sources has been unexpectedly enlarged, and now for the first time set research into Gnosis on a new basis, quite independent from the reports of the heresiologists. The new sources will allow us greater control than before the picture of the material handed down by the church fathers. You see, the church fathers had realized that many of the Gnostic ideas were very close indeed, to their own views. And so they tried their best to demonize these sources as much as possible. But the sources, for such a long period of time, did not survive to give a reply. Well, guess what? With this discovery, we have enough, so there is a way for us to reply back. The Gnostics can speak back and go, hey, wait, you quoted us wrong. That's not what we meant. That's not what we thought. Isn't that great? And funny thing is, we have so much, a huge corpus that I just described, that beyond comprehension when it comes to how well we can refute certain kinds of assertions made by the early church fathers. So there you have it. Okay, so moving right along, we take a look at the Nag Hammadi, and we realize pretty quick quickly that while the early Christian writers, the early church fathers make it very clear that they believe that Gnosticism is a Christian heresy, it turns out, surprise, surprise, that's not how it started. What? No. Taking a look, we'll go there right now. Taking a look, it turns out that Gnosticism was originally an alternative idea within Hellenistic Judaism. They discovered in the manuscripts documents that have no connection whatsoever with Christianity, but have every connection with Judaism, Hellenistic Judaism, prior to the time of Christianity. These materials, some of them, even date back to the 1st century BCE and the 2nd century BCE. Wow. And so Gnosticism in this form starts out with Judaism, mixing with Judaism, and then goes into Christianity from there. Okay. So there you have it. Why was it put away? Why was this library hidden away? Well, there was Marvin Meyer mentions a letter by Athanasius that was declared in 367 CE, which declares against these fabricated books, which they call books of tables, in which they show stars, in which they give names of saints, and therein of a truth have inflicted on themselves a double reproach, and so forth, yada, yada. And so it was condemned. And so as a result, many of these who had these collections try to hide them, and that's the collection that Muhammad Ali discovered. So now this earlier form of Gnosticism, this Jewish Gnosticism, is called Sethian Gnosticism. Sethian Gnosticism. Okay, it's an earlier version. Okay, Kurt Rudolph states that the contribution of Jewish traditions and ideas to the development of Gnosis, which there have been recognized even earlier, can now be shown more clearly and more cognately. He continues that there's definitely a Jewish substratum that arises from both apocalyptic and Hellenistic Jewish speculation literature that dates to the 3rd to the 1st centuries BCE. Yet Greek philosophy here has its place too. Rudolph also says, also the question of the contribution to Greek thought, particularly on its philosophical Platonic side, can be better and more sensibly answered with the aid of some of the new texts, and in general, the contribution of contemporary philosophy emerges more strongly. So it turns out that Platonic thought mixes with Jewish thought and creates this other system, Gnostic Jewish system. And we're already at our first work. And we're going to go over time, as you expected, because we started late, 15 minutes. Okay, so the first work we're looking at is called The Apocalypse of Adam. So I don't want to spend more time on the earlier stuff. The later stuff, however much time we have, not as big a deal. I want to make sure we get here. The Apocalypse of Adam. This is a Sethian Gnostic work. It's a Jewish Gnostic work that predates Christianity. Okay, so it does lack a grandiose cosmogony that we see in so many of the later Gnostic works. It does seem to resemble Jewish apocalyptic literature. Here, according to the story, descending from the lower God, the creator God, descending from the lower God, the creator God, the demiurge, remember. The aeons, of the pleroma, they split into Adam and Eve. So descending from this demiurgic lower God, this material God, you have the aeons split into two, Adam and Eve, with Eve attaining that which is described as Eve gets what's called glory, doxa. And how she gains this glory is from observing some kind of phenomenon within the creator God. And so learning from this experience what is described as a word of knowledge of the eternal God beyond the creator. Okay, so basically, Adam and Eve, they look up, and Eve realizes that within this material lower God, there is an essence shining through of a higher God of spirit. And she recognized that this lower God was not the ultimate God, that there was a God, a monad beyond it, right? In fact, Eve recognized uh, her own kinship to the angels and how this made them even superior to the lower God. And then, in a moment of wrath, this lower God had realized this possibility and had divided them into two as punishment. This version of the story, Adam never attains special gnosis and remains lost. It's Eve who gains the knowledge, the true knowledge. As with other Sethian Gnostic works, for instance, the Gospel of the Egyptians and the paraphrase of Shem, the Apocalypse of Adam divides history into three parts, the tripartite division of history. Each phrase separated by cataclysmic events, such as a flood, right? And then the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then the culmination of all things with the last judgment. Once again, you notice it's all Hebrew Bible references. The direction of man's fate is dependent upon whether one follows the creator God, the demiurge, the lower God, or the eternal God above him. All along the way, the demiurge seeks to annihilate, to get rid of the seed of men from retaining this life of knowledge. So his designs are constantly interrupted by these swift redemption moves by the higher realm. In the case of the flood, for example, the demiurge is going to destroy the world by a great flood. What happens here is angels are sent by the higher creator God, the higher spirit God. Angels are sent who gather the elect and bring them into a place where the spirit of life dwells. In Sodom and Gomorrah story, when fire and brimstone threatened to destroy those of the line of Seth, right? With a disaster, luminous clouds are sent by this higher God to descend upon the scene with the three aeons, Abraskets, Sablo, and Gamil, setting these special people amongst the higher aeons who will then resemble angels. This process finally terminates with what's called the advent of the luminary of acquaintance, which is the great Seth. As to be expected in the final judgment scene, those who remain faithful to the creator God are punished, while the Gnostics, after much persecution, are finally vindicated and rescued once and for all. There you are, did all the end credits. Hey, now you understand. So basically, and in many cases, that special line is the line of Seth, right? Who come from Adam and Eve. It's the line of Seth. The other ones, not so much. There's another work of that's Jewish Gnosticism. It's called the Authoritative Teaching. It has Greek philosophical as well as Zoroastrian influences, but it's a very Jewish text as well. According to this work, all things came into being by the wish of the Father deity, and it is claimed that he is the God before anything else existed. As for his character, this God is not presented as some unmoved mover or a monad of light. He is this active agent who initiates the formation of the spiritual and material realms. Now, this does not necessarily mean that he directly contacts matter itself in the creative process. He inspires the design through the manipulation of his own emanations. Whatever the means, the purpose aspect adds to the mystery, since it is expressed that this God wished to bring about a great contest, a great contest in the world. So there's a great contest that's going on in the world to reveal his wealth and his glory. So it almost sounds like a dualism of Zoroastrianism, doesn't it? Right? You know, like Ahura Mazda versus Ado Manu, right? The sphere of matter is as dark and ignorant as what we have come to expect in the Gnostic paradigm. Spiritual soul is thrown into the body, and becomes filled with lust and hatred and envy. Authoritative teaching is quite clear that from material substance arises lusts that results in the existence of the body and the material soul. From here, the soul succumbs to empty pleasures, proud passions, envies, and nonsensical things, and finally degenerates to prostitution in a material brothel. That's kind of colorful, isn't it? So there, you can see also the connection to the hymn of the pearl. Are you seeing this idea of descent and fall? To a certain extent, the same image of the soul as prostitute in the exegesis of the soul is there. But basically, it is shown as giving herself to one and all of her adulterers, betraying themselves as her husbands in a lustful charade of material folly until she becomes defiled and a poor, desolate widow. So that's what happens. But the spiritual soul encounters other opponents beyond its material body. These foes seek at all costs to keep the soul entrapped in the body and submissive to their whims, while these entities are called adversaries, enemies, and man-eaters. Watch out for the man-eater. There is one amongst them who appears to be their superior, and he's known as the adversary, right? He is specifically the devil. So you can see this Zoroastrian idea entering into the text. The authoritative teaching provides many illustrations of their crafty methods. The most popular example concerns the metaphor of the fishermen. The soul of men are presented as fish swimming about in the sea of matter, with the devil lying in wait as the fisherman. He baits his hook with delectable morsels of material nature and that will sow the fate with deadly addictive poisons. Once caught, the adversary consumes the soul. No, right? The bait is nothing less than the food of death. So beware of the food of death. The fraudulent enticements include here's a laundry list of things you need to stay away from. So beware, right? The love of clothes. Sorry. Love of money. And this is interesting. The love of a beautiful body. Don't fall in love with the idea of looking beautiful. While the natural ramifications include vanity, pride, envy, and what is considered to be the greatest of enemies of evils, ignorance and ease. Ignorance and ease. Okay. By the way, Plato was the first to use this kind of illustration. Plato himself depicting humanity's relationship to death as a fish drawn to a fisherman's hook. Now, the opponents of the author, now this is interesting. It's very important. Very important. Listen up. Okay, the opponents of the author of this work are called the sons of the devil. The opponents, so the person who's writing this book, those who he sees as their opponents are called the sons of the devil, who go about in bestiality and who are so ignorant that they, quote, do not seek after God. And then he says, quote, in fact, about these opponents, he says, they are more wicked than the pagans, because, first of all, they do not inquire about God, for their hardness of hearts draws them down to make their cruelty. In fact, let's go a little bit further. He says, in fact, the pagans, he says, he oftentimes in this work, he esteems them favorably, because he says, at least they, quote, give charity, and they know that God, who is in the heavens, exists, the Father of the universe, exalted over all their images which they worship, unquote. Now you realize there's a problem here. You're going, wait a minute. So his opponents, they're not pagans. Well, who are they? Right? They're not pagans. Who are they? They're other Jews. Oh, here we go, right? Greg Riley and other scholars have realized that this other group, by the way, they just they have a lack of desire to seek or inquire about God. They're known for hardening their hearts. As the hearts, like Pharaoh's heart was hardened. The reference also talks about that they neglect the temple within as opposed to the temple without. So wait a minute, these are temple Jews. That's right. So it turns out, there we go, that Judaism splits. Whoa, big moment here. Epiphany. Judaism splits. And what happens is the Hellenistic Jews, many of them, split from those who are the temple Jews, who are the established Jews. And they feel themselves ostracized. And they most likely end up in Egypt. Well, when does this happen? Well, we can understand when this happens. What we have is that during the time, ancient Palestine was under the Greeks. Antiochus III, for example, who is connected to the Seleucids, right? And Judaism was compromising with Greek philosophy. They're blending together. Jews were wearing Greek robes. They're exercising in Greek gymnasiums, right? They didn't want to be circumcised. We know this from Josephus and other sources. And then, of course, Antiochus IV, Epiphanes. You guys remember the Hanukkah story, right? He arrives and he says, "You guys might as well just become Greeks." And he, of course, sacrifices a pig on the altar, the Holy of Holies, and you have the Jewish revolt, right? The Maccabean revolt. Well, during this time, those people that were too Greek, right, that were too connected to those ideas, 167 BCE, those people who were too connected were thrown out. Well, most likely, this group that was thrown out, that was anti-temple or more pro-Greek philosophy, they fled and ended up in Egypt. And that's the source in the beginning of Gnosticism. Whoa, is this fun? That's where it starts. And look, you find the evidence right here in these codices. Okay, so there you have it. So that is the authoritative thinking. There's other works. Now, I know we won't get much further. I mean, we're going to get a few more texts, and then we'll abbreviate. But we're going to make sure, as I promised you, we're going to get to the Apocrypha of John. So I mentioned we have Jewish, Gnosticism. Well, what happens next is another kind of Gnosticism, and that is Christian Gnosticism. So this is the next level, Christian Gnosticism, and they call this Valentinian Gnosticism after the author of the Gospel of Truth. We have from the Nag Hammadi codices, right? His name is Valentinius, right? What's interesting about Valentinius is the fact that he was very popular during the 2nd century CE. His form of Gnosticism was readily part of what would become part of the Proto-Orthodox Church. His followers regularly attended church services and used the same books that would later be deemed as scripture. They just happened to excel at allegorical interpretation of scripture, and their theology aligned closer to the Gospel of John. In fact, Valentinus, in his Gospel of Truth, quotes more from the Gospel of John than any other book to show how popular he was. According to Tertullian, he says that Tertullian says that Valentinus almost became Bishop of Rome. What? And by the way, he was never declared a heretic during his lifetime. Whoa. And he taught Gnosticism. Tells you how mixed this belief system was at this time. Okay, so one of the works of Valentinian Gnosticism, of this Christian Gnosticism, is known as the Apocryphon of John. So here we go. I want to try to get this thing. The Apocryphon of John. In broad terms, now we kind of understand how these systems work. The monad, which is called the perfect virgin spirit, by the process of thinking, created the first power. By thinking, the first power, like out of the mind of Zeus, Athena, first power, the first image, known as Barbalu. Barbalu. This is the feminine aspect of this invisible spirit, this monad. Uh, and um, and of course, what happens is this feminine aspect then asks this invisible spirit a quintet to be created of aeons to be formed from her essence. So create four more from me, resulting in foreknowledge, incorruptibility, eternal life, and truth. Being greatly pleased with Barbara, the Spirit anoints her with his own kindness, and so creates the anointed, Christos, from her, Christos or Christ. Through Christ, of course, now originates four luminaries, Hermoso, Orazo, Duathai, which is the seed of Seth, and Elithith, which are the Pedants, each with three aeons within its realm. Sophia, or wisdom, is one of the aeons beneath Elith. Uh, she is the thought of the thought from within herself. And what happens is that this Sophia, what she does is she contemplates the invisible spirit above Barbara. And when she contemplates this, she's not supposed to because she is more limited spiritually. Sophia, the wisdom, is more limited because she's part of the emanations. As the emanations go down, as the aeons go down, they become less and less perfect, less and less, fully able or capable of understanding the higher knowledge. But she tries to understand, this all high God above and this invisible spirit, which is kind of humoristic. And as a result, she becomes pregnant. She becomes pregnant with an image that was created not out of the spirit's will. It is a serpentine creature with a lion's face and eyes like lightning. It was an imperfection. And she attempted to conceal her handiwork from the rest of the Pleroma, but her mishapen son, known as Yellowboloth, say that three times fast. That Yellowboloth betrayed her. He betrayed her. Her own son, her own lion-faced son, took the lion's share. Sorry, and still basically took part of her power and fled into another realm. Immediately, he set about creating authorities below himself, 7 in charge of the heavens, and 5 overseeing the abyss. While he shared some of the fire with these aeons, he withheld the power of the light that he stole from his mother. He still had this power he took from mom. After establishing his superiority over his domain, he boasted that he was a jealous God and that no other God existed except for him. After this self-exalted pronouncement, he fell into this impious madness and began to create the world. The emergence and condition of man are also addressed in this complex text. Now a voice suddenly resounded from above the divine Pleroma, announcing the creation of the human being. Yes, humanity is created as a foil. Yalbalith, this lion-headed spirit, in his arrogance, believed the sound could only have come from his mother, but actually came from the higher divine one. The newly composed image of the ideal man or human happened to reflect upon the waters of the material realm. And he saw it in the waters of the material realm. And it inspired Yalbalith to create a copy of this form for himself, trying to capture it. While he was able to reproduce the appearance of man, the exterior of man, he failed to be able to make it animate. Now, a much dimmer version of her once brilliant self, Sophia, enters into the situation. And she had succeeded to convince the Pleroma of her desperate need to get her light back. I want my light back, and my son took it away from me. That lion-headed, terrible son who denies the existence of anything above me He took my land away. I want it back. And so there's got to be some way of doing it. And so it convinces uh, these spirits within the pleroma, 5 luminaries, to convince the demiurge. He tells the demiurge, what I want you to do is I want you to breathe life into this reflection of the man in the waters. I want you to breathe life. It's a trick, because what happens is when he tries to give life, breathe life into this human, the light that he took from Sophia will be breathed out of him and into humanity. You guys got it? It'll be taken out of him and put into humanity. I wish when I took Gnostic courses that they would have explained it this way. It makes it a lot easier. Okay. Anyway, I'm taking the time to understand these ideas. Okay. Thereby, of course, I said, releasing the spirit of Sophia from him. Adam, this first man stirs. It becomes animate. It becomes strong in intellect. Now, the so-called first ruler, the demiurge and his numerous archons and angels, realize that they made a mistake. They created something that's potentially more dangerous than themselves, and they become very jealous and fearful in desperation. They fling this Adam into the realm of deeper matter and encase him within the dark cave of the material body. A counterfeit spirit is also produced to instill in the man darkness, ignorance, and desire. So we have a counterfeit spirit. In response, Sophia sends Adam a helper called Zoe, which is hid within him, life, and life abundantly. At this point, they have their own generative narrative. What? Their own Genesis narrative. What? Really? Yes. Here it is. So this is the new Gnostic narrative that's popular, oftentimes in other works. Set pieces are familiar, but the meanings are different. So Adam is, guess what? He's set within a garden, but it's a trap. And all its beauty is a mere illusion. The tree of life is there also, but it's the fruit, it has the fruit of death that leads to Hades. Conversely, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is now identified as the epinoia of light and is therefore good. So you need to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And who's going to help out? The serpent, of course. So in this version, the serpent is not sinister, but it comes from the higher realm as a divine guide, leading Adam towards the recognition of his place in the world and away from the evil of reproducing and lust and destruction. As for Eve, now you're seeing the problem here. Of course, the demiurge is upset. Adam has too much power. So what he's going to do is I'm going to try to steal his power away, and I'm going to divide him and take part of his power and make Eve out of that power. So he's divided, and Eve comes about, and then it gets really bad. Because then the demiurge, then this unclean spirit has sexual intercourse with Eve. And that brings about Cain and Abel. You guys got it? Cain and Abel. So they say, basically the text says that she was raped by the ignorant idolater. And from the seed of Cain arise the race of non-Gnostics, right? So anybody who's a non-Gnostic is of the seed of Cain. And in this case, for the Gnostic, has nothing to do with race. Nothing to do with race. It's everything to do. So it doesn't matter. So non-Gnostics were people that were oftentimes in the church, according to the Gnostics. The non-Gnostics were people like Peter was a non-Gnostic, right? And Andrew was considered a non-Gnostic. Is this making sense? But other line, but Gnostics came from another line, because then you have Adam having relations with his wife Eve, and they bear a son by the name of Seth. From Seth arises the Gnostics, from that lineage. And that will include, of course, Mary Magdalene. Sound familiar? Right? That will be from the line of Seth. That will include John the Apostle. So John the Apostle is on that lineage. You guys learning things? Is this interesting? Okay, so Seth's lineage is important. Okay, and obviously this is the apocryphon of what? John! John the Apostle. So yeah, so he's named after that. He's connected. Okay, so looking at the time, I'm going to squeeze in probably not much more. So I'm trying to think here, looking through this. There's a few other works that I'd love to get to, but I'll just kind of go over briefly. You have other works like, for example, the second treatise of the great Seth. But here it's not really talking about Seth. It's more Jesus Christ by name is mentioned. And much of the system has a resemblance to that of the Apocryphon of John. You have also, you have the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, right? And if you want to hear more about the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, I happen to do an entire talk of Mary Magdalene earlier in this series, so take a chance and listen to that. I go into detail about all of that. But I will just say that it opens in the middle of a dialogue between Jesus, described as the Savior, with his disciples, but they are frustrated by Christ's words, and Mary tries to comfort them as best as she can. Then Peter asks Mary to share any special gnosis or knowledge from Jesus, declaring, "Sister, we know that the Savior loved you more than the rest of the women. Tell us the words of the Savior which you remember, which you know, but we do not, nor have we heard them." Mary responds, "I saw the Lord in a vision, and I said to him, 'Lord, I saw you today in the vision.' He answered and said to me, 'Blessed are you that you did not waver at the sight of me, for where the mind is, there is the treasure.' I said to him, 'So now, Lord, does a person who sees a vision see it through the soul or through the spirit?'" Then, of course, Jesus reveals that the inner self is composed of three parts: the soul, the spirit, and the mind. There's a mention of going through the various powers and unlocking those the secrets as she rises above. You're going to have, of course, Peter not believing the whole thing, Mary correcting him, and eventually, of course, the idea that she's not just loved most amongst the women, she's loved most amongst all of them, including all the disciples. That's a great work to read. All right, and of course, you do have other works too. I mentioned Valentinus. We do have the Gospel of Truth, and I'll say briefly what the Gospel of Truth is about. Basically, Valentinus declares that, something is wrong with the universe. And it was not the sin that many Jews and Christians said came from their disobedience to the Creator, he argued. That what was wrong did not stem from our guilt. That in fact, he says, humanity was not in error at all. No, Valentinus told the Romans, that the fault did not reside in us. The fault is that there is something wrong with the universe. That the universe, this material cosmos, was defective because of its very materiality, and so imperfect, lacked in integrity. The illness of the universe made the universe sick and made us sick too. Yet we can be saved through gnosis, through knowledge, and this knowledge rises from Jesus. In the Gospel of Truth, Valentinus makes it very clear that Jesus Christ is the Savior, but not in the way you would think. For he was, in his vision, the great physician that can cure us of our sickness through his knowledge, and so we can become spiritually saved this way. Valentinus almost became Pope. You heard this, right? So that shows you how popular he was. So, we also have the Gospel of Philip within this collection. I want to mention that this is the first work that really defines the idea of 7 sacraments. What? Wait, what? Yeah, Gnosticism is what, and Valentinus is connected with the gospel of truth, but he's also connected with the gospel of Philip. And most scholars of Christianity agree that, yeah, unfortunately, it's Gnosticism that first articulates these ideas. Ooh, you're learning too much. You're dangerous. Let's take, what are these sacraments? Of course, the first sacrament, you've probably heard of it before. It's called baptism. Obviously, Christianity baptism way before the beginning, but it's now understood as a sacrament. Second, of course, is the Eucharist, known as the wedding feast, where the bread was believed to be life-giving. You're basically giving your special medicine and directly connected to Jesus. Meanwhile, the wine was filled with grace and connected to the Holy Spirit. Yet by taking in the bread that was Jesus and the wine that was the Holy Spirit, the Valentinians believed they were actually bringing about the perfect human being, making the angelic counterpart into themselves. And so through the Eucharist, a believer gradually realizes the spiritual flesh and blood of the resurrection body in and of itself. Isn't it interesting? Because a lot of those ideas do filter into Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, but not quite in that way. But still, the components are there when it comes to the mysteries, but understood in a different way. Once again, the wine was filled with grace, connected to the Holy Spirit. The bread is life-given, connected to the Logos. All right, so there it is. The third sacrament is anointing. The fourth is the initiation of priests. The fifth is the sacrament of the rites of those who are dying. Basically, it will become the extreme unction, right? The sixth and seventh sacraments are interesting. They're unique. The sixth one's called redemption, apokryphos, and the next one's called the bridal chamber. The sacrament of redemption is supposed to finally end the separation between the fallen spirits and each believer, where the illusion of this material world finally and completely falls away. Sometimes during the sacrament, the pronouncement is made, I am established, I am redeemed, I redeem my soul from this aeon and from all that comes from it, in the name of Eo, with redeemed in his soul, unto the redemption in Christ, the living one. The Gospel of Philip is filled with references to the next sacrament, the bridal chamber sacrament. And we know from Irenaeus, living at that time, that this sacrament was specifically related to the followers of Valentinus. In a theological sense, the fallen Sophia, with seeds of her spirit within us, because of her mixture with the material realm, needs to have those seeds, those aspects of herself, return to the pleroma above. And so the bridal chamber reunites those believers as Sophia, who is the bride with Christ, who is the bridegroom, and through the symbolic marriage become one with the pleroma once more, at least eventually in a spiritual sense. So the bridal chamber idea is we become Sophia. We become the bride of Christ in a more spiritual, literal sense, right? We now, of course, know that the bridal chamber ritual was performed by other Gnostic groups beyond Valentinus, including the Gnostic Thomas Christians. And we know that there's a reference to this in the Gospel of Thomas. All right. So obviously, we talked about the first group we mentioned, Scythian Gnostic, Jewish Christian Gnosticism. Second group is Valentinian Gnosticism, which is Christian Gnosticism. The third group, which we will not have time today, although it's worthy of talking about other times, it is basically the Thomas Gnosticism. This is the early Gnostic ideas that we find in the Gospel of Thomas, and then with the Thomas school. But it's more in a simplistic form. The Gospel of Thomas is just a list of sayings. Jesus says this, Jesus says that, but they all have this hidden Gnostic meaning, that they are strangers in a strange land, that their origins are not from the world of material and darkness, but in the realm of spirit and light, and that their destiny is to re-enter the sacred repose. And to realize this restoration in the light, Jesus is made to say that believers must separate themselves from the world by stripping off the garment of the flesh, thereby passing by that which binds us to the material world. Yet the special secret knowledge is given only to those who desire to purify themselves. And we're going to have then aspects of Gnosticism going also within a fourth group, and they're known as Johannine Gnostics. Many people say the Apocrypha of John is also connected to Johannine Gnosticism, and that's basically is that when we take a look at the Gospel of John, we realize that it's filled with Gnostic ideas. In fact, I will end on this note. Here it is. Let's now go through just the introduction of the Gospel of John and let you have this moment of epiphany and realize that this is why many early Christians did consider the Gospel of John as a Gnostic text. In fact, to the point where the majority of Johannine Christians were Gnostic and not Orthodox Christians. And that the very first commentary on any book of the Bible occurred in the 2nd century, and it was written by Gnostic Christians on the Gospel of John, and it is the work of Heracleon. If you're interested, I have it right here. Part of it does exist. And you know what? The second Bible commentary of any New Testament book and any gospel was also written by Johannine Gnostic Christians and of course, you're going to have this by a Gnostic by the name of Ptolemy from the same 2nd century, and it's on the Gospel of John. In fact, it gets to the point where the papacy declares Johannine Christians as heretics. Yeah, they did. When? In the year 202 CE. You didn't know that. And finally, but you're going to have also, they were declared heretics earlier during the around 189 as well. So you're going to have, in fact, you're going to have that Bishop of Rome excommunicated all of Asia Minor based on these Gnostics and Montanists and other groups. Is this fascinating? You guys learning too much? Okay, so here we go. So here's the Gospel of John. I want you to listen closely. It says, in the beginning, okay, was the Word. In arche. Wait a minute, Dr. Rietveld. Arche means beginning, as in not just starting, but always continuing on arche within the pleroma. Wait, that's a Gnostic word. And we have it as beginning, as in start. And it doesn't mean that. It means always going on, continuing, overflowing. And the word is arche, as an archon. In arche, ho logos. The word logos. Okay, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. Actually, that's not right. But they all have it wrong. It says, Kailo logos e pros ton theon. Pros doesn't mean with. Pros does not mean with. The Greek word for with is meta, being with God. No. The word pros means the logos proceeds, emanates. It's the word for emanate. Is that interesting? It's the word emanation. It's emanating, proceeding, coming forth. Wait, that sounds Gnostic. It does. This one was in the beginning, origin with God, right? All things came into being through him, right? And apart from him, not one thing came into being, has come into being. In him was life, and life was the light of humanity. And the light shines in the darkness. There's the dualism, light and dark. The darkness did not comprehend or did not understand it or seize it or so the word is darkness did not overcome or seize it, did not snatch it. So there is a conflict between light and darkness. You've seen the dualism between the material world of darkness and the spiritual world of light, right? Okay, a man came sent from God whose name was John, right? This one came for a witness in order that he may testify about the light, so that all would believe through him. That one was not the light, but came in order that he could testify about the light, right? The true light who gives light to every person who coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, and the world did not recognize him or know him. I'm looking at here at the Greek here. I'm looking at the word in Greek. I'm actually reading through this. What I'm stumbling through, I'm looking at the Greek. How am I doing? And I'm looking at the Greek, did not recognize him. I'm seeing here igneto. That's a word gnosos. It says, no, the world did not know him. The world did not have knowledge of him. Does that make sense? There are those who lack knowledge, right? Okay, good. He came to his own things, and his own people did not recognize him. But as many as received him, to those who believe in his name, he gave them authority to become children of God. He was born not of blood, nor of the will of flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. So here again, now we have the material spirit dualism. And the word became flesh and took up residence or tabernacled amongst us. And we saw his glory. Remember the glory? The glory as the one and only from the Father, full of grace and truth. The word full is no. It is the word is Greek is pleroma. The pleroma of grace and truth, right? And then John testified about him and cried out, saying, "This one was he about I said, the one who comes after me is ahead of me because he existed before me. For from his fullness, the word is pleroma, we have received and grace after grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth about through Jesus Christ. No one has seen God at any time, the one only God, the one who is the bosom of the Father, the one who made him known." That's it. There it is. So you see, if you've just followed everything that I just read, you realize, wait a second, Dr. Rietveld, that follows a Gnostic journey. that's the journey of the soul. Wait, Dr. Rietveld, aren't they using the same Greek words? Yeah. Oh, and you have the emanations, and you have the logos, and you have the pleroma, and you have the movement, and you have the dualism of light and darkness, and knowledge and ignorance, right? And spirit and material. And you just had a big epiphany moment here. So how could those who are Gnostic help but not interpret it in the way that they do through their systems? Is this fascinating? Are you guys learning things? But what's happened, and I have the Greek here if you want to go through the Greek, and I labored through it. It's fun. Cold reading online. Like the name. But right there we go. Hey, okay. Well, the point of the matter is that even doing a cold reading, you realize that your translators change things around, right? To change things around to not allow for these ideas to happen. But you got to realize this is English. When you read this in Greek, it's a whole other world. And even to this day, a lot of these ideas that I'm talking about, these Gnostic-like ideas that are deemed in the West to be Gnostic, a lot of these special knowledge ideas, despite all the early church fathers, are still within Eastern Orthodoxy to this day, especially Greek Orthodoxy, because guess what? They're reading this in Greek. And it's still, these terms are pregnant with these ideas and with these mysteries. You guys learn a lot? Was this fun?
Yes.
Well, I think this is the best place to conclude. I feel that we are now experts in Gnosticism and how this all came about. And so I will stop here. Thank you so much. Well, that's not an easy talk to go through, is it? There we go. You have any question? Oh, goodness.
Well, it was great how you included all of your personal relationships to these documents, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And the scholars who translated them. That was awesome.
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot of fun going into this, you know. Oh, I have, you know, it's yeah. Yeah, and it's fun to look at my library. And now that now you know who James Robinson is, you realize that this is kind of a big deal. You know, he's a very important man. Oh yeah, you James Robinson. Yeah, you know, I have a whole bunch of these. A whole bunch of these. In fact, you guys ever heard of Walter Bauer? He's a very famous early 20th century scholar. And he's, of course, a scholar of Gnosticism as well as early Christianity. And what happened is that he just discovered news about the Dead Sea Scrolls. He's very famous. Look up Walter Bauer, Bauer, Walter Bauer. He is very important. Okay, you can see him all over. He's online. You know, he's the one that talked about the fact that there are more than just one Christianity. There are multiple Christianities, you know, out there right from the beginning. Well, he just learned about the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he was interested in it, and he wanted to write a book, an article on it. But he died. It's too bad. So he was collecting his newspaper articles concerning his discoveries of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And you know what? Guess who has them?
Cool.
I do.
Wow.
Including his own his writings and so forth. See from the library of. In fact,
amazing.
I took a whole bunch of this research. So what happened is James Robinson, when Walter Bauer died, took his research. And then what happened is that when Robinson was giving it away, I grabbed Walter Bauer's research. I have here. But I have a whole bottom shelf over here are James Robinson's personal files. If you ever come over here to my house, go to all those files down below. That's all James Robinson's. And of course, I have a few shelves over here of his books too. So James Robinson. So literally, the idea of the Nag Hammadi and James Robinson, part of the legacy, is really in this home right here. So it's kind of cool because I have books where he has his notes in it, his own personal ideas and thoughts of James Robinson. James Robinson, unfortunately, passed away about a few years ago. So that's it. Anyway, just thought that was fun for you guys to see.
Do you have any plans to publish any of that or to compile that into anything?
Well, it's no good. I mean, you know, it's all outdated.
Yeah.
So, but it's fun to have.
Yeah.
it's fun, you know, because people are wondering, you know, how come Walter Bauer never came out with a book? Was he really doing research on it? And I can say, yes, he was. So I have also Raymond Brown, some of his files here too.
Can you expand on his research?
Huh?
And update it? Can you expand on his research and update it?
I plan to update it. Sorry, what?
Can you expand on that research or update it?
It's too antiquated. Yeah, but you do learn a lot about the person. You learn about historically about what these people are interested in, what they're looking for. With the Dead Sea Scrolls, I think Walter Bauer panicked because it was such a massive discovery, and he didn't know what to do because how would this fit in with his understanding of early Christianity. And was the Essenes, were they another Christian group or not? That seemed to be his concern. What I think is interesting is Walter Bauer, you know, is also trying to wrap his mind around the Nag Hammadi, but unfortunately, it wasn't all published. So as we talked about before, you know, took James Robinson by 1970 starting this movement during the 70s. So it's kind of like, you know, here you have the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is important. Here you have the Dead Sea Scrolls that's dominating scholarship, and so that starts to dominate people's perspectives of early Christianity. And meanwhile, we don't have enough. And the Jews, Israel was very efficient when it comes to the publication of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, they got it done pretty fast. Great. I mean, like you know, very, very organized. And yes, they did a few problems. I mean, they had a few problems. Like, for example, when they put the pages together of the Dead Sea Scrolls, they used a brand new discovery called Scotch tape, which wasn't smart because it turns yellow. But they didn't know. This is amazing. It's clear. They'll put it all together. But what I'm saying is that at least they published it in a very quick, forthright way. But the Nag Hammadi, it got lost. And because of that, scholarship favored the Dead Sea Scrolls and had very little about the Nag Hammadi. And that has tainted Christian leadership, scholarship and leadership. No, maybe should say scholarship to this day. It really has. So people, you have a bias. So basically, when people interpret Christianity, they interpret it heavily with a Jewish bias. And Christianity has another component too. The Nag Hammadi really illuminates not only the Jewish Hellenistic aspect, but also the Greek philosophical ideas that entered into Christianity as well. You can't ignore it when you see this hybrid form of Christianity. And we got to realize that many early Christians thought that this Gnostic Christianity was the Christianity. And there's not just one Gnostic group. There are many Gnostic groups. And just like that, there are many Christian Orthodox groups too. So it's too bad. And it's so sad about that mix-up. It's like, hey, you know, Nag Hammadi, Dead Sea Scrolls. And Dead Sea Scrolls wins out. And Nag Hammadi, it looked like it was going to go the realm of oblivion. And can you imagine 13 different codices all split up? You know, how do you get everything back? That takes some work. Anyway, yeah. Any other questions?
So you brought the most fascinating aspect, I think, of what the Nag Hammadi has brought to light is exactly what you said. Is Judaism to Christianity isn't just a straight line. It's actually a culmination of multiple lines, including the Greek philosophy. And that was just the most fascinating aspect of that. I mean, what's your feelings on just the pure influence of Greek philosophy on Christianity? How strong do you think that influence really is?
Extremely, and Christian scholars today, many of them try to avoid it. Yeah. Extremely. In fact, yeah. They're reading. There's so many. I can go here, but there's so many difficulties when it comes to their understanding of Christianity. They want so badly to make it as pure Jewish as possible. And there's nothing wrong with having the Jewish interpretation, but they have to remember that it's Hellenistic Judaism. It's not the Judaism that you see in the Old Testament. It's the Judaism that occurred between the Old Testament and the New Testament. That's where Christianity grows from. And the Hellenistic Judaism is a mix. It's a hybrid between these earlier Jewish elements and Greek philosophy. It really is a blend of both. And you cannot read Philo of Alexandria and go, well, there's no connection with Greek philosophy. You got to remember, in my Kabbalah talk, there is no such thing as a Jewish Kabbalah without the Greek philosophical ideas, of these ideas of the emanations. The same emanation of ideas, same emanation theology that you see in Gnosticism, these emanations going forth, you're going to see that in the tree of life. Haven't you noticed? Emanating down from the one, from the crown. Is this making sense? You have the same emanation ideas proceeding forth, moving forth. Sometimes using the same ideas of procession, of movement from the one to the many. And so, yeah, so you're going to have, so basically, because the Greek Hebrew Bible was translated, Septuagint, when you translate something from Hebrew into Greek, automatically you're going to be importing Greek philosophical ideas with the language, and with it, Greek ideas that will go into Philo of Alexandria and these other Jewish thinkers. It's a hybrid. And then, of course, you can go even further than that, too. We got to realize that if you're thinking about Pauline Christianity, you got to realize Pauline Christianity comes from Tarsus. This is Anatolia. It's Asia Minor. It's a whole other culture. You got so much of Hellenistic Judaism, comes from, you have Egypt. You got Anatolian influences. Yeah. So, it's not what you think it is. And so it's sad. And even when you take a look at Galilee, I've been to Galilee, I've been to Nazareth, and I look across the way and I just see, from where I'm sitting right here to where the 57 runs into the 91 is a huge, the same amount of distance. So from Fullerton, a short ways away, so about 6 miles away from where Jesus was lived, you're going to have a giant Greco-Roman city with stadiums and baths and the majority of the inscriptions are in Greek. You're going to take a look at the synagogue, and they have, what do they have in there? They have all the astrological tables. They have the zodiac there, and I saw that for myself right there on the floor. And you realize, wow, this is they're Jews, but they're also mixed with pagans, because we found images of Dionysus there and Pan and others at that same archaeological site. Like Jesus is growing up next to this major Greco-Roman place. How can you avoid that kind of influence? We can go into the historical Jesus. That's a whole other topic, right? But no matter what, Hebrew Bible, sure you have that, that legacy, but whenever the New Testament reads the Hebrew Bible, it is, except for 3 exceptions, it's always from the Septuagint. It's always from the Greek version. It's a Greek milieu. And when people say, "Oh no, the Gospels are originally written in Aramaic," no, they weren't. Surprise! Although, surprise, surprise, we do have evidence that we sometimes went from the Greek to the Aramaic. What? Wait, I thought Hebrew letters. Oh, we could talk about. We can go in there, Papias of Areopolis. We can dissect that and have some fun. No, in fact, when you look at the Gospel of John and you take a look at the Greek, there's even Greek puns and plays on words that are only possible in the original Greek. It's really composed in Greek. there's even rhymes. So, and I do teach a Gospel of John class at Cal State Fullerton, and we go through the original Greek text slowly over the entire course, so it becomes greatly evident. So yes, it's after we go through the text, you're going, wait a second, there is a very strong Greek and influence within the New Testament. And we have also mystery religions. You got Homeric echoes throughout the Gospel of Mark. whoever wrote the Gospel of Mark memorized the Iliad and the Odyssey to such an extent that he can't help it when he composes the Gospel of Mark. He has Homeric echoes. He phrases things like some of the passages. That's how. So you must have learned Greek from using the Iliad and the Odyssey as a readers. It's fascinating. You guys learning too much?
Too much?
Okay.
Can you learn?
That, huh? Any other questions? Sorry.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you going into that. That's very eye-opening.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the people who do know this are Christian scholars. I think, unfortunately, it has become a faith issue. People feel that if they accept the Greco-Roman aspect of Christianity, that it will go against their faith interpretations, which I think is really an irony, because the New Testament itself stresses the fact that it goes both ways. It talks about the Jews as well as the Gentiles when it comes to interpretations. But whoever reads that, self-explanatory, it's written to both the Jews as well as the Gentiles, and it is to, and so Paul the Apostle, he uses mystery cult language oftentimes to interpret various ideas of the gospel, of what the gospel is about in his letters. He uses this. He uses it to his, it's like it's there, hidden in plain sight. Any other questions? Did I cover quite a bit? Did you guys enjoy the story of where it came from?
Yes.
Yes and no. I mean, it's kind of depressing. I mean, how much was lost, not just in these particular, this library collection, but over the generations of just simply burning the pages. I mean, it's terrible, but yeah, it was eye-opening again.
Yeah, it's a miracle that it survived. A lot of people who are more superstitious say that that's why it's unlucky. It wasn't meant to be. That there's some divine power that was working against this publication.
That's one outlook.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep.
And that was the outlook of many from that time, especially during the 50s and 60s, where you had the Dead Sea Scrolls that seem to be asserting this Jewish legacy, and then you have this stepsister, right? What is this wicked corpus that is working against us and our beliefs, and this is going to mess things up for us. And I don't want to have my reputation tied to these works of the devil, or I'm upstanding scholar from the Midwest, and so there's a lot of people who said, hey, to James Robinson, great in the field, I just don't have time. I don't want to do it because there's a stigma tied to it. Like, yeah, there was. It's not just a coincidence that everybody couldn't do it. Here you have James Robinson, who has a very great reputation, and he can't get anybody to help. That's pretty bad. Yeah, so it's like, then of course, then he turned to his graduate students. So guess what? Guess what we're doing? So we're going to do, and Marvin Meyer told me this. He said it was great. He said he just invented classes. He says, okay, so this class is this text. Okay, and so you guys are gospel of Thomas. Woohoo! Okay, that's your class, and your job is to translate and work through it and clear it all up. And he put them in teams. And you guys are the Apocryphon of John group. Okay, and then he would moderate and go through and check everything out. And they worked together feverishly, and they got course credit for that. Marvin's all, I got lots of course credit just by doing that. It made it easy. So what course are we inventing today? Yeah, but it was. He said it was a wild time, and then he said that they asked him to go to down to do archaeology in Nag Hammadi. He says we didn't find anything, but he said we had a lot of fun. Because they're hoping to find more texts. They didn't find nothing. You know, they went around all over the edge of that cliff and went through it. But he says we had a great time. You drank lots of beers and sunburned. All the I got real badly burned and yeah. But unfortunately not a melanoma. But anyway, yeah. So there you have it. So, but yeah, they were there 3 times. I mean, we found Quranic stuff. It's like it's not what we're looking for. They're hoping to make a connection with the Poconius monastery, and they think they did. So what happens is that they think that. Well, of course, the problem is those will be those who are against this whole thing. But but maybe somebody in the monastery went, "Uh-oh, my collection is going to be found out. I better hide this." So they're dumping quick. Yeah. Any other questions? Any other questions? Yeah, it's a very complicated system though when it comes to these emanations. But I hope you guys kind of got the rhythm. All kind of repeating after a while. You just change the names, but there you have it. So, all right, one more time for questions, and any more questions?
I think that might be it.
Okay.